I'm going to sell out twice today. New podcast in the description, talking about the Pistons and their recent losing, and then I also talked about NBA 2K18, and if I like that game or not overall. But now it's time to talk about some potential NBA players to be traded this season. We're going to start with Lou the Shoe Williams, who is putting up like 20 points a game for the Clippers right now, but he's on a one-year deal. And I don't know if it would really make sense for the Clippers to re-sign him given their situation, although they have won a couple of games in a row last time I checked. But still, it would make sense for them to get some assets for Lou Williams. And I think a few teams could definitely use his scoring abilities. He can shoot some threes off the dribble. He can make some contested three-pointers. He can play in the pick and roll. He can attack switches and isolations, and I would say he can beat some perimeter players off the dribble as well. Just a quality enough offensive player, and I do think that there are a few NBA teams who are having kind of a tough time on offense and could use a creator like Lou Williams for, 20 to 25 minutes a game, put some points up on the board for you. And the first team, it would be the Portland Trail Blazers. They are really good defensively, and they're not so good offensively. And I guess the point of this would be getting just another guy besides Dame and CJ who can create some of their own offense, because they don't really have that right now. If you had Lou Williams coming off the bench, I think that could help them out a lot. The only fear would be if having Lou would just make them drop off something fierce defensively. I don't think so. I mean, if you manage lineups well with Nurkic and Aminu, I think you can stay afloat defensively while taking a jump on offense. Next, I want to talk about Jared Dudley, who's feeling himself a lot after shooting that three-pointer, and then looking at that dude who was leaning forward in the crowd. House from DC said that Jared Dudley is fat, and he's not entirely wrong, but he still manages to be a decent enough 3-and-D player, and among the Phoenix Suns' struggles the past couple of seasons, they've still been a better team when Dudley's in the game. Better defensively, and then offensively they have a little bit of an uptick as well. I mean, if you just have a guy who gets out of the way on offense and makes the right pass and hits open threes, and then can defend a few positions and is a pretty smart defensive player, and he's a good dude and a veteran and all that, why not, Now, he is on a 2-year contract, which makes him a little more difficult to trade, and someone else might not love the idea of him as much as if he was on a 1-year. But still, if you have a guy who can shoot threes, play small forward or power forward, then I think some teams would want him. And I think the Detroit Pistons are interesting because Stanley Johnson, his lack of offense might be the reason why that their offense has fallen off a cliff lately. And, I mean, look, he can't really beat anybody off the bounce. He can't really hit open threes. If you turned him into Jared Dudley, that could be something. Now, I wouldn't trade Stanley Johnson. I would look for some other way to make that move happen, but that could be something for Detroit. Now, if we could talk about Ersan Ilyasova, 3-point shooter, man, on the Atlanta Hawks, also on a 1-year contract. That's kind of a theme when it comes to a few of these guys, because teams don't want to lock themselves into a guy long term. Now, part of me is a little fearful that Ilyasova has some Jeff Green in him, in that in theory, he's a really effective player, but then when you actually have him on the floor, you could be a little disappointed. But I would like to see him on a team that's just better and has more guys who can command attention from a defense and can get Ilyasova some more open shots. And there could be a chance that the Utah Jazz could be that team, given they have Rubio as a point guard and all that. I mean, here's the thing. Derek Favors, he's a good player, no doubt. I'm a fan of his game, but he and Rudy Gobert just hasn't really worked. The spacing can get really rough with those two in there. The Jazz are like -7 on the season with those two in the game. Would Ersan Ilyasova replacing Derek Favors be better for the Utah Jazz? I'm not saying they have to necessarily trade one for the other, but if Ilyasova just became that and then Favors was moved somewhere else, because then you'd have a real shooter next to Rudy Gobert. Now, I know they do have Jonas Jerebko, but Ilyasova is just more of a volume shooter than Jerebko. Could be more effective, could make the defense pay more often. And then finally, we have one more Atlanta Hawk, Marco Bellinelli, a two-guard who Doesn't put up like a whole lot of points and never really has in his career, but he's always had the ability to, be a three-point shooter, beat some guys off the dribble, and I do think he could be a 15 to perhaps 20-minute-a-game guy who can provide some offense for a team. And if there's one team who's looking for offense off their second unit, it's the Washington Wizards, and that's been their story for a couple seasons now. As part of the reason for that, Scott Brooks, sure, but the Wizards are currently 10th in offense and 10th in defense, so I don't think they're too far off from being effective here. Now, they did acquire someone in this offseason who I was interested in to see how he would do, and that's Jody Meeks. He really hasn't been making his threes. He's been around 31% from three, whereas Bellinelli, I think, would be better. I think Bellinelli could play off a wall and Beal pretty well. So that's just an idea. Bellinelli on the Wizards, also on a one-year contract. As long as they don't have to give up too much to get him, could be a nice addition to what they got going on.